In this video today, I'm looking at this game. It's a Ziploc called Ascari. It is in Asias Edizioni, which is, I think, is a game company. It looks like a magazine, but this really is more of a rules book. It's a short rules book, too. It's, let's see. I guess there are no page numbers. Anyway, it's colonial era Italian versus Eritrean and Ethiopian forces in the late 1800s, and it's not strategic. It's somewhat tactical. The units are basically company sized, and they're kind of organized into formations that would be like battalion sized. And so they can do melee and movement. And I think these units are probably like 100 to 200 men per unit. And you also have cavalry. Some of them are on camels and cavalry, and these units are like 100 men per point. And artillery's 3 or 4 guns. And I think the hexagon represents 250 meters. So aside from combat units and informational markers, there are also leaders. Leaders that have a die roll modifier that they can bring in, and some abilities like, for opportunity fire if they're with a unit and things like that. So it's a fairly simple game. It's got the sequence of play is basically, when you start the turn, the player moves and then conducts melee, which happens in the hex. So you need to move into a hex with an enemy. While you're doing this, you can be the victim of opportunity fire. Then after that phase, units that are at range can actually conduct range fire. And I think the range is generally 4 hexes, requiring a line of sight. Then an administrative phase where you take your markers off and then the other player gets to go. So that's fairly how it works, fairly much how it works. There are a couple of special rules in this game. One is that if a unit that has rifle weapons gets eliminated, you put a rifle marker on the map, symbolizing that their rifles can be picked up by units that don't have guns, like, spear armed units or cavalry units. They can actually pick the gun up, and then as long as they have that marker, they can fire like a rifle unit. So that's kind of an interesting bit of chrome. The combats tend to be modified by die roll modifiers, which basically are the elevation, so you're rewarded for having the high ground. Or if you're retreating, you can lose some combat ability while you're doing that. The terrain has effects. Leaders can have a die roll modifier on combat, and a bayonet charge can also give you a positive modifier. And I think there are 5 scenarios in this game. One is called First Agordat, and that is in 1890. And that's the Italian colonials against the dervish. Then there's another one about 3 years later in 1893, Agordat, the second battle. Then there's one, Coatit, 1895. I have no idea if I pronounced that right. Then Amba Alagi, 1895. And then there's one, I think it's between the dervish and the Ethiopians, Metema, in 1889. So you have quite a few battles to experiment with in here. I'm going to take a look at the first Agordat battle. And this does have a couple of special rules. One is that it has booty units, which the dervish player has. And this is he's obtained these units, and they look like camel units. They really don't have combat ability, but they were taken as loot from the Dega village of the Beni Emir tribe. And so they're now traveling with the dervishes. And what can happen is when they get within range of the Italian colonials, I think when they get within fire range, you can roll a die and see if that unit doesn't defect, because they're not really loyal to the dervish. And so if they do defect on the die roll, you flip them over from the camel side to the women's side, because there were women in these units, and these women represent, an open rebellion against the dervish, and they can actually attack the dervish from right within the ranks. So that's kind of an interesting idea. The dervish player needs to win by exiting 4 combat units off I think it's the left map edge. So they got to get through the Italian colonials. Or they could also, if they can get, some of the booty, one camel unit out, they can win. Or if they wipe out the entire Italian colonial force, they can win. Otherwise, the Italians win. So it's fairly much as simple as that. So we'll take a little bit of a look at some of the pictures I have of this game on the first battle of Agordat. So here we are on the map with the first battle of Agordat. And this is taking place on June 27th of 1890. And the Italian Ascari troops in Eritrea face a raiding party of dervishes. So the picture that you're looking at here is near the village of Agordat, which is held by the Italians. You see the Italian flag there, and you have some Italian units in the green, and they are being led. These are the Ascari. They're being led by Captain Gustavo Farah, and this is the plain of Agordat along the left bank of the Ichiri River. So there are not very many Italian units in this game, but you see in this picture the setup. Then I'm going to flip over in this next picture to show you the opening setup of the dervish camp at Al-Gadin. And the dervish forces are in this encampment along the river Barca, and they have, as I mentioned earlier, have raided the village of Dega. They killed the leader, they kidnapped hundreds of the women there, and then these dervish troops are now heading back to their base at Kassala. And they have to get through the Italian Ascari forces to succeed. This game doesn't really have timed turns, so it goes until the dervish player fulfills one of his victory conditions, or if one side or the other's units are all gone. So there's no real turn track in this scenario. You just flip whose turn is it based on which flag is showing, and you alternate turns. The dervish player is the initiative player here, so we have them now leaving their camp and heading toward their base, which is on the left side of the map, and the Ascari troops are waiting for them. However, at this point, the dervishes are still out of fire range, and you can see these units have their flag. These are yellow units, and you also have the camel units, which represent the booty that they've stolen from Dega. Now, in this next picture, you're seeing Captain Farah of the Ascari, who has moved his left wing toward the into the palm trees. It's a little bit of some cover for him. Not a lot, probably palm trees, but a little bit. And he's got some units there waiting to intercept these dervish troops. So as the next picture shows, you see dervish troops advancing, and as they get into range of the Ascari can perform opportunity fire. And initially, this was very successful. 2 of the Abraham rubs are eliminated. And this next picture just gives you a little bit of an overview, and you see the on the top left part of the picture, you've got Captain Farah, and a couple of his units there have opportunity fires markers on them, and that's because when some of these dervish units got into range, they were successful in taking them out. So a good start for the Ascari. Continuing on to this next picture, the Ascari are taking some shots at the dervishes. You see all those opportunity fires markers I've laid down, but they all missed this time. So it's mostly ineffective, and the first Abraham Rube is reduced and suffers some casualties. And you'll see that's the marker that has the brown stripe. It's reduced from its original state. Next, we go into the Ascari part of the turn, and the units basically are static at this point. They really can't fire because they had used opportunity fire earlier. But Captain Farah charges the first Ibrahim Rube and engages in melee, and the dervish troops end up falling back from this. So it was a little bit successful, and now that some of the Ascari are within range of some of the dervish booty, I decided to make a check to see if any of the Dega women rebel against their captors, and all 3 that you see depicted in this picture, which were within the line of sight, do rebel. So they're flipped from the camel side to the women's side, and now you see they have combat factors, and they can actually attack, in this case from the rear, these dervish men. So as shown in the picture, many of the Dega women who were taken captive have rebelled. This next picture shows the dervish formation continuing to advance, and they come into contact. Men from the 3rd Abraham Rube try to advance along the Barca River, and they are using palm trees as a little bit of cover, but you see that there's an Ascari unit right there, and it ends up eliminating the unit in fire combat. This next picture shows the first rub is firing on the Ascari unit in the Italian center, and that unit ends up being reduced. So you'll see the Italian unit there in the middle of the picture has that large green shading because that unit is now reduced. And that's one of the victory conditions for the dervish. If they can eliminate all of the Italians, they win. So this shows some initial Ascari casualties. Going on to the next picture, the 3rd Rube fires at the Italian forces on the right flank and misses, but then the 3rd Rube decides to try to cross the river and gets hit with some opportunity fire from the Ascari troops. So that dervish unit actually was destroyed. So the Ascari knocked out another unit. And then this is an overview of the battlefield. The Ascari troops are falling back a little bit to get better position as the dervish are expected to continue to attack. And meanwhile, some of the troops pick up rifles that have been left behind. Please stay tuned if you'd like to see how this game finishes out in my next video. Have a great day.